Shalom, family. I'm so glad you are here. It is, this is going to be a tough one. I'm not going to lie to you. I can't even make this more pleasant because of the nature of the topic. I wish I could. And when I found what I'm going to read to you, a lot of times, I guess sometimes I share personal things with y'all. When I found this article a few months back, I read at night because sometimes it relaxes me enough so that I can go to sleep. Well, when I read this at night a few months back, I couldn't sleep. And I could not believe that someone or a group of people can hate you to this magnitude. It is way over the top. It is way too far, and it's unjustifiable, for real. It really is. I mean, I don't care what any of these folks say, there is no justifiable reason to take things this far. But remember, our Heavenly Father said they get double. And you know what's so funny? I was listening to Big Judah, and he was talking about how they think their children are not going to face any judgment or punishment, despite the fact that it didn't matter if you were young or old, everybody went into slavery. No one was spared. And they like to tell us, oh, we brought you from Africa on slave ships. Well, when the slave ship got here, let's go with that scenario. When the slave ship got here, they did not cherry pick who was good and who was not. Everybody on the ship, if they survived, they went into slavery. So how the hell do you get off believing your children are going to be spared? And your children get double too. That scripture just don't mean adults. Your children will get double too. So let me just kind of set this up. The account that I'm about to give you came from a former slave. He told his story in the 1960s when he was 107 years old. And this is what he witnessed as a slave in the South, in Florida. So he was in Florida. He was around the location where the babies were used as alligator bait, but what he saw went way deeper than that. And you know, they try to give us the perception that this just occurred in Florida. When I read his account, it went well beyond Florida, y'all. And I think many of us got common sense enough to know something like this never happened in one location. And another thing they used to do, just like they would make postcards out of the lynched bodies, they made postcards and took pictures of our babies being devoured by alligators, and they sent those postcards nationwide too. So, these folks have a lot of nerve, the nerve and the audacity of them to sit and believe we shouldn't be talking about this. But the reality is, our people lived through this shit. Talking about it ain't crap in comparison to living through it. So y'all can miss me with all this. You shouldn't talk about this. You can go screw yourself. I don't care how you feel about me talking about it. Screw you. All right, let me collect myself. It took me a couple of months to build up to it. How did I get here? My son helped me get here. I told this to him a couple of months ago when I found it. And he just said to me, "You got to tell your subscribers. They may know that black babies were used as alligator bait, but," he said, "they may not know how far beyond it went from that. They may not know this part at all." And he said, "You must tell this part of the history." And I decided to do this. So, y'all, let's get started. And it's okay to be angry. If anything, we haven't been angry enough about these sort of things. So it's okay. Be angry. Let it out. That's the problem. We don't do that enough. All right. Let me get the slides up here. All right. Let me go back to this first slide. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a real still shot of a black baby boy that was tied to a tree. And you can see the two alligators right here and right here. This is an actual photo. This is not a drawing. And you can see the baby is halfway down the throat of this alligator. This was a baby boy. This picture was snapped, put on postcards, and sent around the country. This is a real picture. And it's believed that this picture was taken in 1910. And there's more photos. They're just hiding them. Okay, just like the lynching photos, they didn't send one photo, they sent a multitude of those photos around the country. And they did in this instance too. It is horrible for somebody to tie a baby to a tree and then snap a picture as the alligator come tear them away from the tree. So this is rare to even have this photo. So when I saw it, I needed to share this with you. It's not a character. It's not a black and white drawing. This is an actual photo. So this did really happen. It did happen. Okay. All right. So let me get to this story, and I'm going to also show you some of the slides. Now, this is just them making mockery of it. So you'll see the little knickknacks and, you know, I even saw one with a black teenager. And what they did was they stuffed this alligator, and then they had a black teenager lay inside of the alligator's mouth, and they took the picture. I'm not showing that one, but there's one out there like that, and it's sick. For them, this was fun. And ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of articles that you will find out there on this subject matter. So, I mean, they really couldn't deny it if they want to. They had no shame. They weren't ashamed to do this. Your forefathers were not ashamed. And I want you to think about this because they don't change. They don't change at all. Look at how many innocent black men and women are behind bars, mainly black men. They don't have no shame about this. You don't see any of them going to the forefront to, you know, sh show, "Okay, we made mistakes. These innocent people shouldn't have been in jail. We're gonna right this wrong." You don't ever see them doing that. You know why? Just like their forefathers, they have no shame of doing this to you. No shame. Tiki, thank you for the super sticker. So, don't expect them to show any more shame about what's being done to us to this very day. They won't show it. Neither did their forefathers. I got more articles here. Now, this one was interesting. This was at New York Zoo, ladies and gentlemen, and they got two black female toddlers, and they called them pickaninnies back then. But they were two small little toddlers, and they took them up to the New York Zoo and used them as a decoy in the reptile house to lure out the alligators. So don't ever let anybody tell you this just happened in Florida. No, it went beyond Florida. It was not just Florida. All right. And then, of course, they got all of these drawings of when they used black babies. And they would even try to convince black mothers to rent their babies out so that they could use them to get the alligators, and they would pay them 8 cents. 8 cents, y'all. 8 cents to use your baby as a decoy. All right, so here's another article. This one came out in Florida where it was asking, do you know they used to put want ads in the papers for black babies? Babies wanted for alligator bait will be returned alive. This was in the newspaper. They would post ads for black babies, and they were very open that they were going to use them for alligators. And this is one of those ads. Here is another one, The Baby and the Crocodile. So again, they're asking, and they sure weren't using their babies for bait. But yes, oh, yeah, we'll bring your baby back alive. Oops, my bad. Oh, the alligator got your baby. But yes, they would put ads in the paper asking for black babies. It is sick. It is. Here, wanted fat babies for crocodile bait. So you're going to see how far this went. Here's another one. Again, these were articles that went in the paper. So, I mean, they couldn't deny this even if they wanted to. So let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that some of this is going to sound very graphic, but it must be told. Okay. So there was a former slave by the name of Johnny Lee Gaddy, and he did an interview with Dr. Antoinette Harrell back in the 1960s. All right. And he gave his account of witnessing children, black children, not only being fed to alligators, but fed to hogs and used as fish bait. This article, ladies and gentlemen, there was another article that came out in 1923 in Times Magazine, and this was from Chipley, Florida. And it spoke about black babies being used as alligator baits. And then they would take pictures of these babies being devoured by alligators and put them in pictures. They would make postcards out of them and other trinkets. And you saw some of the trinkets in the slides that I showed. Those were the trinkets that they sold based on pictures that they took of our babies being snatched by alligators. And they said, it was an evil practice. It is evil to even sell that sort of thing, but that's what they do. That's what they do, y'all. So we know August 2019, that marked our 400-year anniversary, and America has not been right ever since. Oh, America, you got so much hell to pay. It's not even funny. Now, we know the cruelty of slavery and the cruelty of the things that happened to our children and the suffering. And it went from our slaves were sex trafficked, our slaves were human trafficked, and they were selling organs, just like, they sell organs on the black market. Well, they were doing that even back then. They were selling the organs and body parts of black men and women to wealthy people. The wealthy were the ones buying it all up. And they were sex trafficking black children to these wealthy people as well. Okay. So these atrocities, abuses, and modern day slavery will plague America like an incurable cancer until we address this ugly past. So Dr. Antoinette Harrell thought she heard the worst of the worst. There was even more to discover. Harrell heard of stories that were so evil that people did not want to talk about it. She had a hard time getting people to talk about these atrocities because it was just so evil. But she met a man by the name of Johnny Lee Gaddy, who was 107 years old. And he still remembered and saw with his own two eyes what happened. So Johnny witnessed a child hand, a black child's hand. And he saw this black child hand because what he would do at the end of the day, he would always take the trash out. And when he took the trash out, he would have to pass by the hog pen. And this one day, he went to put the trash out, and in the pen, he saw a black child hand in with the hogs. And he knew it looked strange. And he also noticed, the fire pit was going. So when they discovered he saw this, they told him if he wanted to stay alive, he better not repeat what he saw. So Gaddy, this is the former slave, alleged that they were cooking black boys and feeding them to the hogs. That's what this former slave said. Gaddy told Harrell that he worked as a slave, cutting lumber and raising livestock and farming land. He worked in the swamp with large alligators. And guess what he was also saying? He said they forced boys to also work in the swamps around the alligators. And Gaddy said his life was a living hell at a state operating school. So he worked at a reform school as a slave. And he said it was a living hell. The reform school was operated from the 1900s to June 30th, 2011. That school was still operating in 2011, y'all. And he said this was a state-run school by Florida, and the school was located in the Panhandle in the town of Mariana. That's where this school was located all the way up until 2011. But he was a slave in that same area too, prior to being forced to work at this school. This was not a surprise to Harrell. She had previously met the family of, other people that lived in Gillsburg, Mississippi in the 60s. Kane Wall Sr. So this is another slave that she met that was over 100 years old at the time. Told Harrell that his family story recalled a time that there was this white man. He rode a horse throughout the area, picking up black babies. And in the beginning, the people were not catching on to what this white man was doing. So he said he would pick up these black babies, cut them up, and use them for fish bait. And he said he would always know when this atrocity happened because this man would ride around on his horse with a sack dripping in blood. That's what he would do. And he said this man was the most evil, meanest man he ever came across in his life. So this is what the white men would do. This man would, and they would distribute this bait to each other and go fishing with black baby flesh to catch fish. He said some of the people, when they realized what was going on, when word would go out that this man was coming around to claim their babies, the black residents would clear out with their children. They cleared out with their babies. So he said some people in the South claim white men used black babies as alligator bait. And he said it was true. Now, where was this happening? He said in the swamps of Louisiana and Florida. That's where they were heavily using black babies for alligator bait. So don't ever listen to somebody tell you that it was just Florida. It wasn't. It went beyond Florida. Now, this is just one man's account. I'm sure if there were more, you probably would hear more locations, including Mississippi. But this man said he definitely knew of this happening in the swamps of Florida and Louisiana. He said they used the baby to lure these alligators. Now, how would they do it? Now, this they would take the babies, skin the babies alive, and then take them out to the swamps and use them for alligator bait. And I can, as sick as this is, they did it because the alligators are gonna be attracted to the blood, all right? So, they didn't just take them out there, they skinned these poor babies alive. How the hell do you hate somebody to that magnitude? You've got to be a pure devil to do something like that. Cosmic Dream 1990, thank you so much for the super chat, Lisa. I'm so glad you are speaking on this. They have the nerve to call us savages. Judgment is upon America. Absolutely it is, and it deserves to be upon America. America don't realize what's happening to them. They deserve every ounce of it. Okay, so they were trying to attract, of course, the biggest alligators they could. So they used human flesh and blood. And this was during the slave era. He said they would kidnap the babies, skin them alive, and drop them into the swamp water. In 1923, there was a Times Magazine publication from Chipley, Florida, that black babies were being used for alligator bait. So they were publishing this stuff. They weren't even ashamed of it. They weren't. And then June 3rd of 1908, the Washington Times reported zookeepers at a New York zoo baited two pickaninnies. And we know those are little girls, toddlers. And not only did they have them up there to as bait for the alligators, they passed around pictures and postcards and trinkets. D'Angelo and Kirk Manuel. So these were researchers with Harrell. They traveled to Shubuta, Mississippi to investigate 6 lynchings. Manuel read that they were young black people that were lynched. And this lynching was in 1918. They lynched two brothers, Major, 20 years old, and Andrew Clark, 16. Those were brothers. And they lynched two sisters. Alma was 16 years old and Maggie Howes was 20. And both of these sisters were pregnant when they got lynched. Alma was just 2 weeks away from giving birth when she was lynched. Both of the young women were pregnant by a dentist that employed them, so they got raped. They got raped. So, major sign up for the draft for World War One on September 9th, 1918, and these boys were lynched. So Ernest Green and Charles Lang, they were lynched in 1942 in the same town where the alligators were baited, our babies, our forefather babies. Their life was cut short. It is no telling what the future held for those two young boys. We will never know the effects they could have had on this world, said D'Angelo. So it was alleged that Andrew and Major murdered Dr. Everett Levega Johnston a married white dentist where the four young people worked. So they worked for this man, and he impregnated those two black sisters. So he was killed, and of course, they accused these four young people of killing this doctor. Anybody could have killed him because he sounded like a wicked ass person, right? So they said Maggie was smashed in the face with a wrench and thrown from a bridge. When the victims were buried the next day, some people said they could still see the baby moving in Alma's stomach. And this was after she was lynched. They said they could still see the baby moving around in her stomach when she was dead. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, they're talking about I'll just read this. Harrell and her interns were also investigating a case concerning missing boys because even back then human trafficking was going on. It was very heavy going on in the South. All right. So they were investigating two missing boys. And this was Smith and Simpson County in Mississippi near the 1900s. And the location that they went missing from was called Sullivan's Hollow. So they said they lived by a man named W.T. Ware, along with his son and sons in law, Turner. It was reported that the Wares had been stealing little black boys. Didn't I tell you they were human trafficking even back then? And selling them to the Mississippi Delta. So they were selling them on the Mississippi Delta. And ladies and gentlemen, didn't they say slavery ended in 1865? This was going on in the 1900s when they claimed slavery was no longer going on. Okay. So they were still selling black boys and girls in the 1900s, but they claim, remember, slavery was over in 1865, right? Yeah. Okay, so they were selling them. One of the Wares was a doctor and responsible for disposing of the boys in the Delta. The Wares were arrested and tried for kidnapping and hiding a boy at a home of Turner in Simpson County until they could transport him to the Delta. The report was filed by the Attorney General in the 1900s. So they were still kidnapping and selling, listen to me now, and selling in the 1900s. Another report filed in Montgomery, Alabama, stating that a young black boy named Young Trammell was taken from his Alabama line and carried into Georgia, where he was sold and forced to work. This was in the 1900s, y'all. The boy's father informed a reporter that he could not get his son back. And his father apparently owed some money. So they took his son and sold his son as a slave from Alabama into Georgia. And he never got his son back. He never got his son back. Many may have never heard these stories because they are not taught in school. Matriel Harrell, educator, and Grambling State University, Alma, knows the reality of the truth. A limited amount of information is present to students in public school system about what actually happened during slavery and the civil rights era. The same information on Black history is given to students year after year. Although the historically Black colleges and universities excel in Black history education, there needs to be more courses offered to teach students how to properly research their history, Harrell said. Johnny Lee Gaddy, this was the elder slave, former slave, said many stories need to continue. Johnny Lee Gadd was taken from his mother in Clearwater, Florida. Mm-mm-mm. He was taken from his mother in 1957. He was driven to Arthur G. Dozier Reform School in Marianna, Florida, without due process from the courts or legal representation. He served his time and eventually released to his mother. Now, don't they arrest our men and even teenage boys for no reason? They did this to him. My goodness. Served time for something that never happened. Harrell team consists of photographers, um, screenwriters who are dedicated in assisting Harrell with bringing these stories to the forefront. So don't ever let them try to tell you slavery was over in 1865 and there's stories of them still buying and selling all over the South. In the early 1900s, they were still doing this. And trust me, it went beyond the 1900s. That's just what they're willing to let you know. But see, these are accounts that came directly from a man that was there and witnessed these things happening. Oh, I oh, I just can't get over when he was talking about how, at this reform school, and he also said he knew some of the boys that were fed to hogs. He personally knew them. And he knew when something was going on because they would have the grill on. They would have this giant grill, and that's what they were cooking these little black boys on, and then throwing them to hogs to eat. I mean, that is beyond sick. And chopping babies up and using them for fish bait. So, I mean, I'm sorry how graphic it was, but yeah, you can see why they want no CRT taught in the schools. You know, the Bible said they would be covered in shame, and I think that's what that is. They're completely covered in shame. So anybody that tries in the public schools that try to teach or talk about these things, now you see them running around to school boards trying to get teachers fired, trying to get um, you know, teachers fired, principals fired, anybody that's up at the school that they suspect is talking about CRT. Well, I guess if I had a history that horrible, you might want to cover it up. I'm not in their lame ass school, and I'm going to talk about whatever the hell I want. It is wicked. It is. I mean, even the slave telling the story said it was just pure evil. And it is. Can you just imagine being around in those times and witnessing what our forefathers witnessed? I is incomprehensible. It is horrible, even the thought of it. Yeah, it really is. And as you can see, in 1957, they were still kidnapping Black children and forcing them to work in different locations in the South. selling them. They said selling them in the Delta was a big thing. So that's what I wanted to cover with you. And believe me, there's, I'm sure, more stories that will crop up in the future that we will be learning about. But am I surprised? No. I knew it had to be something beyond just alligator bait. Now that was bad enough, but I knew it had to be way more than just that. And just like I had suspected, it was. It really was. Yeah. Yeah. You can see how human trafficking is still going on to this very day because it was going on during slavery and Reconstruction and Jim Crow. It was going on even then. So it's something that has been going on for centuries in America. Yeah, you're right. 100% on code B1. You're right. That's why America is in deep debt. America really is in a lot of trouble financially. Of course, they're gonna downplay it, but it just goes back to what I was telling y'all a long time ago. When it comes down to leadership, these people are not born leaders. They're not. In fact, they come from a string of failures. Rome was at one point ruling the world. Rome fell. Greece, remember Greece was also running the world? Greece fell. The UK once was running the world. They fell. These people are the offspring of failures. That's what they are. And look at America failing. They couldn't keep a society going. Every society they came up with fell. Every single one. And this one's falling. Randy Sinclair, thank you so much for the super sticker. This society is falling as we speak. That's the line these people come from. They don't come from people that are successful. They try to tell you that, but when you go and look at the actual history, they're actually from a line of failures. Every time they try to build a nation and run the place, it ultimately falls. Plain and simple. So y'all, I don't have any more info to give you at this time, but we'll come back together because there are several things I still want to talk to you about, and we'll get to different subject matters. Um, but thank you so much for being here, each and every one of you. And I pray that you have a wonderful day and that our Heavenly Father will keep His most strongest protection around you always. Shalom, family.